was going to tell Chris, you got to get here early to get a seat in the back now, right? So, no, good to see everyone on this Memorial Day weekend. We'll, before we get started, we'll start off on a word of prayer from the birthday boy. Fisher turns 26 today, so all right. We are studying the Gospel of John. We're going to probably cover chapters 7 and 8 today. Before we do, though, for y'all who were here last week, remember anything we studied last week? It's been a week. Jesus fed the 5,000 men plus. What's that? He walked on water. Yeah. Yes?
I always found it amazing, I brought this up before, to talk to 5,000 people without any electrical device to elevate his voice. It's just a wonderment how that got projected to all those people. Something about the mountain acoustics, maybe, I don't know.
The acoustics had to be perfect, and I'm sure he projected. But yeah, it says mountain, but probably it just means a higher place, and down to maybe the sea was behind them. But you're right, for 5,000 people, for the voice to carry.
I think it was just another miracle.
Well, there you go. I believe that too. And then followed by again the walking on the water that sent the apostles out. Prior, he prayed, and then he walked out to them. The masses followed him, like, where'd you go? And then they figured out, they went to the other side. And how did you get here? We saw your disciples leave earlier. And Jesus talked about being the bread of life. Of course, he just fed them, so it was kind of the theme. And then, he talked about, you're going to have to be one of my disciples, eat my flesh, drink my blood. And so that was a hard saying, and that's obviously very difficult. Yeah, or cannibalism, but he had, in the end, he had people who had been following him really for the signs and the miracles, and he'd fed them, and then they walked away. But then at the end of chapter 6, Jesus says something to the effect of, are you guys, you going to walk away too? And then what did Peter say? Where would we go? Right? And you've got the words eternal life, I believe is. Yeah. Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. So that basically concludes chapter 6. Chapter 7, we pick up, and who knows? It's probably not the next day. It's probably maybe it's months later. And it says after this, Jesus, following 6, he went about. He was in Galilee. He wouldn't go up to Judea yet. Why? Jews were going to kill him, and when we say the Jews, we're thinking about mainly the leaders, maybe the leading Pharisees, too. But the Jews, verse 2. Now the Jews' feast of Booths was at hand. What is there another name? The feast of Booths we read about. Feast of Tabernacles. Apparently this was maybe in October, maybe akin to our Thanksgiving. There was a time of Thanksgiving for the harvest and so forth. Verse 3, so his brothers said to him, leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples also may see the works you are doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. His brothers, and this is earthly, physical brothers, stepbrothers, I guess, as it were, did they really believe in him? No, not yet. And but Jesus says, look, my time's not yet come. But your time is always here. You guys go. So he said more than that. He said, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it, that its works are evil. You go up to the feast. I am not going up to this feast, for my time has not yet fully come. So Jesus stayed in Galilee. His brothers went up to the feast in Judea. But the Jews were looking for him at the feast, like as Jesus predicted, and they're saying, where is he? There was a little buzz. But did the people believe Jesus was the Son of God? Or who did they think he was? Some said a prophet, right? Some said, right. So you had a division, Some said he's a good man. Some said a prophet. Some said, no, he's a liar. In the end, he's either the Son of God or he's a liar. There's really no in between. Although that's, people are, as their faith is growing, they're seeing and hearing things. A lot of people are in between. Some saying, hey, he's a good man, a prophet, but ultimately, you got to make the decision. He's either the Son of God or he's a liar. But Jesus actually he goes up to this feast, and it's about a 7 or 8 day feast, and so he goes up, and it's in the middle. So whether it's not the first day, it's not the last day, somewhere in between, and he begins teaching. What's the people's reaction to Jesus showing up and teaching in the temple?
That they marvel.
Yeah, why would they marvel?
How does this man know letters having never studied?
Right. So, he didn't go to the West Virginia School of Preaching. He didn't go to Freed Hardeman. He didn't, but no, he did not go to, where the rabbis had been trained. And so, and they know that. But Jesus, what's his response to that? Hey, my teaching it's not mine. This is around verse 16. But he who sent me. 17. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God or whether I'm speaking on my own authority. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and in him there is no falsehood. So, no, I'm getting my message from God. That's why I'm teaching with authority. And then Jesus goes back to, remember we read about this, maybe it's the last chapter or 2 chapters ago. What did Jesus have to say about Moses? And by the way, Moses, he's like the pinnacle for the Jews, the lawgiver, as far their example. He says, look, why don't you read verse 19, Jeremy? Okay, he's very direct. you're not keeping the law. And then the crowd answered, you have a demon. Who is seeking to kill you? Jesus goes on to talk about, I did one work and you all marvel at it. What's the work you think he might be referring to? Could be a number of things, right? He's done a lot of miracles. Feeding the 5,000, or the one, maybe, the following verses, it might be where he healed the lame man, lame for 38 years. And so, what a miracle, but what day did he do it on? The Sabbath. So they're all up in arms over that. But Jesus says, look, Moses gave you circumcision, not from Moses, but from the fathers, and you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. So I think the circumcision, I think when I read it, it's got to be like about 8 days later. And so, yeah, well, it's going to fall on the Sabbath for some kids, right? And so they were allowed to circumcise on the Sabbath. Verse 23, if on the Sabbath a man receives circumcision so that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because on the Sabbath I made a man's whole body well? He says, do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. What does that mean? We're not to judge, but we are to judge.
I think it goes back to verse 17 where it says, if anyone is willing to do his will, he will know the teaching of God. So in essence, if a person lives a righteous life, you'll know the difference between what Jesus is actually trying to teach you, what he is.
Okay? Yeah, it goes back to the heart, and Jesus could tell, righteous judgment, what really comes from God, or hypocrisy, right? More of a, not with love and more of a gotcha type mentality. So exactly. Yeah, I guess it's in Matthew 7:21, Sermon on the Mount, judge not that you be not judged. And so, but obviously, we're to make judgments based on, what God teaches, but not in a hypocritical way or not with a poor heart. So I was, presiding over a jury trial, and I did a few of those, but you ask the questions, the lawyers ask the questions of the prospective jurors. And, it's going to be a 4-day trial. Can you have time, or, you got something going on in your life you can't hear, or do you know the parties, or do you know, have you read about this case or whatever? And so one time, and I've heard this happening to in other courtrooms, but I asked the general question, is there any reason why any of you couldn't hear this case? And someone raised their hand up and said, well, I'm Baptist, or he may have said I'm Catholic, or I don't remember, but we'll just say for the story. I'm Baptist, and Jesus said, judge not, that you be not judged. And I was getting ready to say something, and the guy next to him raised his hand and said, I'm Baptist too. People wanting to get out of jury duty. Okay, so anyway, I digress, a little humor, so. But that's not what it means. By the way, I talked him off the ledge, so. He said, yeah, I can be fair. Okay, picking up with verse 25. Again, the people are talking in Jerusalem. Is not this the man whom they seek to kill? And here he is, he's speaking openly, he's in the temple, so he's not hiding. And they say, we know where this man comes from. Who did they know him as? Or some people knew him as?
Joseph's son.
Joseph's son, Mary's son, kid from Nazareth, right? And so they said, well, when Christ comes, no one's going to know where he comes from, and which was not exactly completely true because, there was prophecy that he'd be born in Bethlehem as well, and of course he was. Joseph and Mary went down there for the sentence, or the census. Skipping over to verse 32, Pharisees heard the buzz, and they sent the officers, their police force, to arrest him. They have this discussion. Well, where are you going? Jesus said, I'm going to be with you a little longer, and then I'm going to him who sent me. You will seek me, and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come. And the Jews said, where are you going to go? Are you going to go out and preach to the Greeks or the Gentiles? They were trying to figure out what he meant there. And I think a little bit later we're going to read the officers. They were so impressed with him, they couldn't arrest him. We're not, I think maybe that's a few verses down here. But Jesus, he talks about, he's talked about, he said, I'm the bread of life, the last chapter. Now he's going to compare himself to something else. About verse 27. What's that? Maybe it's 37. I can't. My eyes are blurry. Yeah. So you need food to sustain yourself, and now he's using another picture for us. Look, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the Scriptures has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water. What's he talking about there?
The next verse says it was the Spirit. Those who believed in him will receive.
Yeah, so there is a reference to the Holy Spirit, and talked about, the Spirit, how the Spirit works when, we put on Christ, become Christians. So that's obviously part of it. So that's what the verse says. But again, this idea, you're going to have, I think there's also an idea, maybe it's not right here, but this, you're going to have life abundant. You come to Jesus. So now we pick up with over to verse 40. And this is, again, where it talks about, some say he's a prophet, some say he's the Christ. But is Christ really going to come from Galilee? So people are debating, who is Jesus? This is where I remember down further about verse 45, I think the officers said, no one has ever spoken like this man. We can't arrest him. And the Pharisees say, have you also been deceived? Have any of the authorities of the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd that does not know the law is accursed. A little bit of high and mighty, we've been schooled with the Pharisees, we know the law. These people who believe in Jesus, they don't know the law. And but somebody did speak up for Jesus at this point. Who was that? Okay, Nicodemus, the one who came to Jesus, met with him, happened to be at nighttime, earlier in the book of John. He stood up and he says, does our law judge a man without first giving him a hearing and learning what he does? Which is true statement. Nicodemus was talking about due process here. You know, gotta give a guy a chance to answer whatever he's being accused of. But the Pharisees, they wanted no part in that reasonable response. What did they say? Yeah. What, you from Galilee too? And then they say, no prophet ever came from Galilee. Yeah. Right. It's kind of like, you know, nobody good ever came out of, you know, name the town. You know, well, we'll use our rivals in Mount Vernon, Centralia or something. You know, it's kind of like that type of ridicule. But, by the way, they were wrong when they say no prophet ever came out of Galilee. Do you know of any prophets that did? Jonah, exactly. So, even in their ridicule, you know, they're inaccurate in what they're saying. All right. Now we're going to come to a very familiar story here in chapter 8. And we'll read a few of these scriptures here. Let's see. How about Ed, can you read a few verses, 3 or 4, starting with chapter 8, verse 1?
When Jesus went to the Mount of Olives, early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and began to teach to them. The scribes and Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery, in the very act.
Okay. So, this is, again, we're still in, you know, the Feast of the Booths. It looks like the beginning or the end of chapter 7. People are going to their own homes, but Jesus goes up to the Mount of Olives, but he comes back the next day to the temple. And people, they wanted to hear him. So they came to him, and he, interestingly, not significantly, but interestingly, he sat down and taught them. So that was, I guess, the style there. But while this is going on, the scribes and the Pharisees, it says they brought a woman who had been caught in adultery and placed her in the middle. And they said this, they make the accusation. She's been caught in the act of adultery. Now, I'll go ahead and read the next verse. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So, what do you say? This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. So, what's the obvious next question? If they brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, what's been left out? Where's the man? If they really caught her in the act of adultery, they would have caught the man unless he ran out, you know, whatever. But they just bring the woman who they've made the accusation against. And why are they doing this? They're doing it to test Jesus. It's a gotcha moment in their minds. And it says, now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say? Was that the law? Was it that clear? Was there a little bit of discretion involved? Maybe. From what I read from a commentary, if it seemed like there was a distinction if, you know, maybe she was engaged. They say adultery, she was engaged to another man, or maybe she was married or not. And one aspect of the law, you know, talked about stoning and one did not. So perhaps, yes.
My Bible reference went back to Leviticus 20 and 10, if I may read.
Yes, please.
If there's a man who commits adultery with another man's wife,
So there you go. Both, and again, begs the question, where's the man? But, so yeah, it had scriptural precedence for commandments for the stoning of those guilty of this. But Jesus, he bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. Verse 7, and as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And think about this. They're testing him, but think about how cruel they are. I mean, this is pure humiliation. To bring a woman in front of everybody. He's got a lot of people there. It's to embarrass Jesus, to embarrass the woman. Yes.
My notes in my Bible say that the reason it was a trap is that either answer he gave would have caused trouble. If he had said, no, don't stone her, and he wasn't following the law of Moses. If he said, yes, stone her, this says that under Roman rule, they weren't allowed to carry out their own death sentences. So then it would have been against Rome. So that's why it was a trap, because there was no right answer, and then Jesus totally goes a different direction. They thought they had it totally cornered. We ask him this question, if he says this, he's in trouble. If he says that, he's in trouble. He said something totally different. And this happens on several occasions.
Right. Well, that's right. And another occasion, the coin?
Yeah.
This God's or Caesar's. Yeah, render unto Caesar the things are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's. But this was that type of moment. But Jesus goes a different direction. What's he writing on the ground? Who knows? Right. You can speculate. Well, he was writing the names of the people there and their sins, and maybe not. But we don't know. But the different direction is, he says, let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. Well, that stops them dead on their tracks, and then it says once more he bent down and he's writing on the ground. We don't know what he's writing. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. I wonder why it's beginning with the older ones. Yes. Hopefully the older ones, in this case, had more wisdom, and they recognized what Jesus said is true. That we're not without sin, so we're not going to throw the stone. And so, by example, the older ones walk out, and the younger ones follow.
As Suzanne brought out, where they thought they had a gotcha on Jesus, he reverses and has a gotcha on them.
Yeah.
He's a master teacher, and it just comes out more clear every more we study.
Right. And they weren't, it was a gotcha. They weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in embarrassing Jesus and embarrassing the woman. So they heard it. They went away one by one. Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. And Jesus stood up, said to her, woman. Now, sometimes we might think, woman, that's a term of derision, maybe, depending on how you say it, right? Inflection. But probably not here. And it's the same, when Jesus turned the water into wine, I think they used the translation woman to his mom. Now, I don't think he was disrespecting his mom there, and not just, my guess is, he's not disrespecting the woman here. Where are they? Has no one condemned you? And what does she say? No one, Lord. Okay. Why? Because they're all gone. And then, what does Jesus say? Neither do I. Go and sin no more.
He's the only one left standing
Well, that's an excellent summary. You're right. He is the only one who could have, but yet he showed compassion. Any other thoughts or comments on that?
Well, we know Jesus can see inside people's hearts, and so she must have been repentant. Because if she was very in denial or very defensive or thinking she was innocent, I don't think he would have reacted that way.
I think that's true. I think that's certainly implied.
She might have thought too, whenever they took her out there, that she was going to be stopped.
I bet she did, yeah. That this is it. I mean, she's humiliated but fearful, yes. So, lessons for us. Yes, obey the commandments of God, but show compassion to people who've been caught up in sin. Okay, we'll go on. With verse 12, there are 7 I ams in the book of John. I am the bread of life, talked about earlier. Now he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So this is interesting. So verse 13, so the Pharisees said to him, you are bearing witness about yourself. Your testimony is not true. So what was the Jewish law as far as, in court, what did it take for witnesses? I guess for testimony to be accepted. You need 2 witnesses. Okay? And I think there's an earlier reference where Jesus is talking about this, but he goes a different direction on this occasion. They're saying, look, you're just testifying. You're your own witness. You don't have 2 people to back you up. What's Jesus' response to that? He basically says, look, even if I just bear witness about myself, he has other witnesses, by the way. He's done a lot of things, in his ministry. But here he says, even if it's just me, my witness is true. I know where I am, I've come from, where I'm going. Basically, my testimony is from God. That's where verse 17 it talks about, in your law it is written that the testimony of 2 people is true. But Jesus says, no, I'm bearing witness about myself, and it's from God. From my Father, is what he says. My Father. And they say, well, who's your Father? Where's your Father? Where's your Father is what they ask. Jesus says, it's about verse 19, you know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. Next verse, these words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple. So my understanding that what they call the treasury is part of the temple grounds, and it is also grounds where there were some areas where women could not go, and they could in this particular compartment, according to one of the commentaries I read. Jesus continues on, says, I'm going to go away, you're going to seek me, and you're going to die in your sin. Where I go, you're not going to be able to come. Jesus said, will he kill himself since he says, where I am going, you cannot come? He said, no. Where you are from below, I'm from above. You're of the world, I'm not of the world. They come back in verse 25, I think it is. Said, who are you? And Jesus says, I've been telling you from the beginning. verse 29. Jesus said to them, "When you have lifted up the Son of Man, then you will know that I am he, and that I do nothing on my own authority, but speak just as the Father taught me." Lifted up the Son of Man, what's that a reference to? Yeah, on the cross. The crucifixion, when he's lifted up. And anyway, as he was saying these things, many believed in him. So, he's lost some disciples. He's gaining more now as he's teaching in the temple. And going on down to, I don't know if that's verse, looks like 31. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, and so there were, "If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Well, this incensed some folks. They said, we are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? Well, now look. The Jewish history, had they ever been slaves? Yes. For centuries. When?
Egypt, Syria, Babylon, now sort of they were under Rome.
They were. Yeah, they were right now under Roman rule. So, anyway, Jesus, he answers them. Again, starts with this, truly, truly, for emphasis. And he says this several times as recorded in the book of John. No, I'm not talking about slavery as far as being under Roman rule or what have you, but to sin. He said, whoever practices sin is a slave to sin. Jesus comes back to the Abraham reference. By the way, we talked about Moses earlier. They really prided their being offspring of Abraham too. He said, "You seek to kill me because my word finds no place in you. I speak of what I've seen with my father, and you do what you've heard from your father." Who do they say is their father? Yeah. And who does Jesus say is their father? The devil, right? Jesus says, if God were your father, you would love me, for I came from God and I am here. I came not of my own accord, but he who sent me. Verse 44, you are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he's a liar and the father of lies. But I tell the truth, you do not believe me. The reason you do not hear them is that you are not from God. Wow. You talk about, laying it on directly. There was no doubt Jesus was going to, he was going to be crucified at this point. It didn't happen now. It was, I think, about 6 months later or so. Their response is, are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? Jesus didn't respond to the Samaritan ridicule. Again, why did they think so poorly of the Samaritans? They weren't full breed. They weren't the chosen people because, in their mind, they were mixed breed. They weren't pure. Jesus he doesn't even respond to that. He says, "I don't have a demon." Goes back to Abraham, and what does Jesus say about Jesus' relationship with Abraham? Yeah. Ultimately, he says, before Abraham was, I am. I was. You know, he said, Abraham saw me coming and he was, you know, happy about it. I said to you, before Abraham was, I am. What's the I am, you know, significance in the Bible? Yes, I am. That's the name of God. God said, I am the burning bush. And Jesus is saying the same thing, I am. They didn't like that, so what was their reaction? Yep. So, you know, blasphemy, you know, in their minds. So they picked up stones to throw at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple. So he miraculously or not, he got through them and got out of the temple. So anyway, good class. All right. Thank you. Which lake?